Welcome everyone. My name is Kunaal Kalyan, a data scientist here at Risk Insights, and I'm a new face on Window on the Week. You'll be seeing a lot more of me in the weeks to come. What does being a sustainable company actually mean for a millennial? It means to understand and actively manage the environmental, social, and governance impact along your value chain, and ensuring that your company's business model will remain viable for future generations to invest in and ensure brand equity. Sustainable transformation looks at how businesses accelerate this ESG change to find new opportunities and avenues for growth, but more importantly, to take all stakeholders into account. Wayne Visser, a fellow of the University of Cambridge's Institute for Sustainability Leadership, who is going to share his insights and views on the impact that sustainable leadership has on our planet. Professor Visser holds the chair in Sustainable Transformation and is a professor of integrated value at the Antwerp Management School. I could spend hours telling you about the accolades and experience belonging to Professor Visser, but I will leave you to take a look at that on his LinkedIn profile. I am privileged to engage with him today. Welcome, Professor Visser. It is truly humbling to have you on Window on the Week and for you to share your thought leadership on sustainable transformation. At Risk Insights, we have built an ESG GPS rating model, and we have been placing significant emphasis on sustainable leadership and ensuring that this topic is taken seriously. I'm sure you have noticed that when looking at the business section of most international magazines or media reports, after COVID, ESG is one of the most important topics of discussion. In fact, COVID has made it easier for ESG to become a focal point for conscious leadership and conscious capital. So, Professor Visser, since you are part of a leading institution when it comes to sustainable leadership, why has Cambridge placed such an emphasis on this topic and why is it imperative in the world today?
Well, firstly, let me say that I don't speak on behalf of Cambridge University today. I speak as an individual, but of course I've been involved in various roles with the Institute for Sustainability Leadership since 2003. And quite simply, the reason that Cambridge is involved in sustainability leadership is that we face a leadership crisis. We have very serious, very urgent global challenges, and unless leadership steps up into the breach, we simply don't get to the place we need to be to avoid the breakdown of society and of the environment.
Thank you, Professor Visser, for that comprehensive answer. As part of our ESG GPS rating model, we've created a disclosure score which shows exactly how leadership, that is, the board and management, are reporting on the aspects in which they are excelling in from an ESG perspective, as well as the aspects which they are dismissing. Our scoring system takes this disclosure into account, and should you be interested, please feel free to visit our website at riskinsights.co.za and we can have a discussion regarding your ESG disclosure. So, Professor Visser, how do you think sustainable transformation can assist corporates in remaining relevant in this dynamic world? Because from a stakeholder perspective, at times it feels as though we are looking at things very differently as compared to leadership, seeing as they already have so much on their plate while trying to cope with the changes brought about by COVID, as well as the ever-advancing technologies which companies have to keep up with. So essentially, the triple bottom line is people, planet, profit. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first we have to ask the question, what do we mean by sustainable transformation? And indeed, is it simply people, planet, profit anymore? Your listeners might be aware, but the originator of the triple bottom line, John Elkington, withdrew that concept a few years ago as a failed management concept in an article that he wrote in Harvard Business Review. And the reason is because of the way it's been applied. It hasn't been applied as a transformational concept, but rather as something more like compliance, something more like incremental change, when what we really need is radical change to keep up with responding to the urgent global challenges we see in society and with regard to the environment. So for me, I think the difference of leadership today is whether they get that distinction, whether I sometimes say the real mark of leadership today is seen in a simple test, and that is admission and ambition. Admission means, are they admitting that the current global economic and capitalist system is not working, at least not for the majority and not for the planet? And are they willing to admit that as an economic institution embedded within an economy that is trying to grow constantly, as business, they are part of the problem at the moment and part of the breakdown? Are they prepared to admit that? More importantly, perhaps, are they prepared to have the ambition that's needed to get us to the solutions, to the breakthroughs, to the innovations we need in order to create a sustainable, or I would go even further to say a regenerative society and future? And that's really the mark of leadership today. Do we see bold ambition? In many leaders, we don't. Now, you mentioned that leaders have a lot on their plates with COVID and other things, but this is part of sustainable transformation. The way that I talk about it is that there are 6 areas of breakdown in society where we need breakthrough. And so, we have breakdown through disruption, especially of our institutions and our infrastructure. And you couldn't get anything more disruptive right now than the COVID-19 pandemic. So being able to turn that into resilience is one of the marks of sustainable transformation. You get others, like, for example, the degradation of our ecosystems and the depletion of our resources. And we need leadership that turns that into a sort of a response that's restoration of ecosystems and renewal of resources. On the social side, you get what I call discontent or lack of health and well-being that needs to be turned into revitalization of people's health. And then on the society side, you get disparities, still the huge and growing gaps between the rich and the poor, which is getting wider in almost every country in the world. That needs to be turned into responsibility through an inclusive access economy. And we have also the role of technology. So many people are disconnected today through the digital divide, and that is also growing. And that needs to be turned into a rewiring of the economy where everybody gets connected through technology, and that the technology itself brings the solutions to the social and the environmental issues that we face. So you can see that it's sustainable transformation is dealing with everything that leaders have to deal with. It's not simply an environmental issue or perhaps a charity, philanthropy, or a community development issue.
Some very interesting points there. So based on some of the key trends we are currently seeing in South Africa in terms of disclosure reporting, we have seen some disclosure improvement. However, reporting on climate change and social risk is far from perfect. What do you think is the reason for this, and do you think that this is a global issue?
Well, this comes back to the question of sustainable transformation or getting to a regenerative economy. Climate risk, climate emergency is one of the biggest challenges we face right now, and we don't transform our economy to a low carbon or even a carbon positive economy without complete transformation. And that is a problem if you're one of the incumbents in the system, if you're one of those that are benefiting from a fossil fuel driven system. And South Africa especially is one of those countries that still has cheap fossil fuels and is being very slow to make the conversion to renewable energy, for example, and to decarbonizing the economy. So, you should never look to the people who are benefiting from the status quo for leadership in getting us to the next level of where we need to be. And that's why we need to rely on other forces, whether that be government or social movements or consumer pressure, international pressure. This is all absolutely necessary. So it's not surprising that there is still some way to go in reporting on climate risk, because in a sense, many companies in countries like South Africa, and they're not unique, there are other countries in a similar situation, are still in a state of denial about the urgency and the extent of climate transformation that we need, the action we need from economies. We've seen very recently, just in the past week or so, new commitments coming out from countries, and even the United States now is showing some real leadership again, committing to 50% cut in carbon by 2030. That's similar to the EU on 55%. UK is even higher on 67%. This is the level of ambition we need if we're going to have a chance of staying within a safe climate system and to reach the Paris Climate Agreement of 2050. And remember that it's countries like South Africa that are going to suffer the most from climate change. It's low-income countries, it's countries where still people live in poverty and are unable to adapt. It's countries that are dependent on agriculture. So really, South Africa needs to step up to the mark and realize that some of the breakthroughs, especially in technology, around renewables, even on lifestyle changes like changing your diet to a less meat-based diet, more plant-based, these are huge changes that can and must be made. And the same is generally true for social risk. Many countries in the world are still struggling to get the handle on social risk. In some ways, environmental is easier to measure, to monitor, and to see the effect of. But social risk is all about, how we treat our people, and whether there are human rights abuses, could be whether there's corruption. These are harder to get a handle on. And, recent reports just come out that shows that South Africa, the population of South Africa, if I'm remembering correctly, it's close to 90% now believe that there is corruption in the government. And so this creates a social risk. Now, once again, if you're the one benefiting from that system, you're unlikely to be the one that takes leadership to get rid of that and to turn a social risk into a social opportunity. But that's what we need. And in South Africa, we've shown that it is possible in the past to have social transformation. It needs to once again step up to the mark and take some leadership.
Thank you very much, Professor Visser. It was a pleasure having you on my very first Window on the Week. I'm sure we can spend loads of time on this subject, and we have been privileged to have you share your insights. It is extremely important to realize that the idea of academia and business sustainability in the real world are colliding. I recall from research that around 2 decades ago, the Basel Accord and the banking sector experienced the same conversion. Since banks, in conjunction with asset managers, are essentially the heart of any economy, who they finance and who they invest in will play a massive role in how we go about protecting our Earth and creating an inclusive and cohesive society for future generations to follow. I am Kunaal Kalyan, and thank you for joining us, and stay tuned to see me on the next episode of Window on the Week. Stay safe.